Hello there, World of Takers. Welcome to the channel. In today's video, we are going to be breaking into something that is very, very important if you want to be winning more battles, and that is equipment. These little slots here that you can put on your tanks, especially tier 10 that cost like 6 million to fully unlock, well, it may be costly, but it does help out massively on increasing your chances of not only winning games, but as well doing better yourself. So in today's video, we are going to be breaking into various tier 10 vehicles that I run with different types of equipment, what my reasoning behind that is, and let me know what you guys think about that behind in the comments down below. So we're going to be starting off with a vehicle like the Super Conqueror, and the reason that we're going to start off with this one is because I'm running Refined Gun. Now normally, especially on basically all of my tier 10 vehicles, I am running vertical stabilizers, and what this does is it actually doesn't lower your aiming time. If you actually read in the description, it says allow accuracy when shooting while the tank is moving to get better. So basically, when you are driving the tank, your on-movement dispersion is better with vertical stabilizers, therefore making your aiming time better in general. But if you're not moving, your aiming time is actually the exact same as before. Whereas Refined Gun increases the chance of hitting an enemy, which makes your dispersion just 10% better. So they're very different equipments. Neither of them makes your aiming time better. This one makes your aiming time better. But yeah, these two here do not make it better whatsoever. The one just makes it more accurate on the move, and one makes it more accurate in general. Now, the thing about the Super Conqueror is that if you didn't know, it has the best on-movement dispersion for a tier 10 heavy tank. It's better than any other heavy, E5, FE2 and 5B, which is insane when you think about it. So, if you've got such a good on-movement dispersion, if you put on Refined Gun, you're not losing anything, except you're just gaining dispersion, because it's not going to benefit you all that much to make your on-movement dispersion better if it's already best in class. Give this tank amazing accuracy with Refined Gun, 0.318. Before, it's the same accuracy as an E100. Now, I actually really enjoy the Super Conqueror because it doesn't miss that many shells. That was the biggest drawback of this tank, and when I did a little bit of research one day behind the Super Conqueror on Blitz stars and Blitzhanger statistics, I realized that, wow, this tank is actually really enjoyable if you run Refined Gun because it actually hits a lot of its shells as it's always aimed in. That's something that is fantastic. Now, moving my way on to another very weird take for me on how I run equipment would be a vehicle like the Object 263. Now, for a lot of people that watch the channel, they know I love my calibrated shells, but a vehicle like the Object 263, I actually don't run calibrated shells on, and the reason behind that is just because I want that DPM. At a certain point and at a certain number of DPM, I would highly suggest that you should be running gun rammer. Now, of course, that line is for every player in their own mind, so it could be 3,500 DPM and you want to get it up to 3,700, you know, the Girl 15, the Leopard 1. But for me, I especially wanted a vehicle like the Object 263, instead of having that higher penetration, even though it doesn't have much premium pen to be able to cut through more armor, I instead opted to get more DPM. I wanted more aiming time and as well, of course, vertical stabilizers because this is a very fast tank. And even though Wargaming did nerf the dispersion to where you can see it's literally the same as the Super Conqueror, the Object 263 on-movement dispersion is nothing amazing. And when you're driving a tank so fast, you need to be able to hit your shells very quickly. So another reason why I'm running vertical stabilizers. Now, on the other equipment on Vitality and Specialization, I would always suggest to run Toolbox. You never ever want to run Enhanced Tracks. I was hoping that the way Enhanced Tracks worked is that it would automatically repair any suspension if it was damaged. But what that meant is your track could not be broken, and it would just repair it, unless it was a big enough shell that would actually break your track. And unfortunately, it's not like that. It's very easy to break your tracks with Enhanced Tracks, so you might think that it'd be great for tank destroyers to actually have tracks that are sturdier so you don't get tracked in the first place, but no, it's way better than just have a toolbox and 30% module repair speed. For consumable delivery system, this is another one that's pretty tricky because you can either get 30% longer duration of consumables or you can get them 15% faster. Now, in my opinion, and I've done the numbers, it is way faster and way more efficient to get the faster consumable speed. 30% longer is only like 2 or 3 seconds when you've got your, 15, 20-second cooldowns. So it's not amazing. Where you can use this, and you'll be saving, 60 seconds, you're saving 10 seconds off of that. So way, way better if you're using consumable delivery system over using high-end consumables. Now, an engine accelerator and improved control, they're very similar. I do run improved control on certain vehicles. If I'm running a light tank, and I think that either the traverse speed is already amazing, and I'd like to buff it more, then I'd run improved control. The thing about both of these is you can see this is 7% to reaching top speed. So it's buffing 7% of all these stats, where this one is buffing 10%. And of course, the higher number you have of traverse, the higher your traverse is going to get with 10% buff. So that's actually great for mobile takes. Unfortunately, for slow takes, it's kind of the contrary. But for this one, I'm running Engine Accelerator just because it's not much of a change. It's only about 1.5. So yeah, I'm going to run an Engine Accelerator. And of course, improved optics. Now this is a very tricky one for tank destroyers. You got to think really how your playstyle is on a tank destroyer. The Object 263 is a very, very aggressive tank destroyer. So that means you have to get your butt into the battlefield. And of course, that goes for a lot of tier 10 tank destroyers at that for me. If I'm running a vehicle like the 113 GFT, I'm running improved optics. A vehicle like the Foch, improved optics. These are all vehicles that are aggressive. Same for a vehicle like the T110E3, all improved optics. But if you make your way to a vehicle probably like the 183, I'm running camouflage net, or a vehicle, let's say, yeah, the 268 is very aggressive, but you gotta find takes that I don't really sit all too much in the front line. There you go, camouflage net on my E4, a take that's got a turret. You can stay at the back of the map, stay undetected. Grill 15 is another one of those takes that's got a terrible camo, so I want to buff that camo just a little bit, maybe even the 4005, yeah. So the takes that need the camo, I'm of course running camouflage net on, but for the takes that I run aggressive, like the Agata Panzeru, that already has awful camo and you don't need better. The E3, the FV2-7 Badger, takes that you actually want to be able to spot your opponents in. These are the takes that you clearly don't want to be running camouflage net on because it's not going to make much of a difference. You can see it's a slight buff here. While stationary, it goes up 14, while moving it goes up 7, and while firing upon stationary, it's 3. And if you pull out a light tank and test this your own self in a training room to see what's better for not being detected at a closer range, well, yeah, view range is much better because you can spot your opponent much sooner than the camouflage net that you're just not able to spot anybody in the first place. So that is another one of my tips. Now going on to another bit is penetration. Now you'll notice that basically for all of my tier 10 tank destroyers, the FE 4005, the Object 268, the Jagdpanzer E100, E4, not the Badger because of course it does have that high DPM, but even the Grill 15, the T110E3, Foch 155, 113 GFT, these tanks, and of course the 183, all of these vehicles, as tier 10 tank destroyers, I am running calibrated shells on. And the reason behind that is because, as always, I like to say there's two big factors: high explosive and your penetration. Now, high explosive is already amazing. You know, 152mm guns, especially on tier 10 tank destroyers, are able to butter through side armor. But the fact that you can increase your high explosive penetration by 9mm is actually very increasingly damage as well, because high explosive, of course, does more damage if you do not penetrate the enemy tank by how much it's able to get through the enemy armor before it is stopped. So, if you have that extra 9mm of high explosive pen, which is 10% more, that means effectively, if you don't pen your shell, you're dealing 10% more damage than you would have before. That's a lot more damage if you think about it. You know, I can see a side-scraping VK90 shoot it at his turret ring and take off, 400 damage instead of 350 or whatever it would have been. That damage does add up. And I can tell you, over the probably thousands of games I've played with Calibrated and shooting high explosive, it's probably given me thousands, maybe tens of thousands more damage over the battles I've played. And that is something that is fantastic about calibrated shells people never really think about until I do say. The other thing is, of course, you get more penetration. The biggest argument I always say about my own personal belief on calibrated shells is, if you need that DPM in a tank destroyer like the E4 or the Grill 15, why are you playing them so aggressive? The Grill is a camping tank destroyer, and it's not like your life depends on this last shell, that exact 2.2 second or whatever the reload is. It's a 0.081 second reload increase. So if you need that 0.081 seconds, then I'm going to be honest, it's very rare. I never ever am relying on half a second for my reload to get there, especially when you have much longer reloads like the Jagdpanzer. You're only getting about 1 second on an entire 14 second reload, when instead you can get an extra 40mm of high explosive pen. I mean, not high explosive anti-tank pen. Like, that's insane. The penetration on this vehicle is able to go up 15mm millimeters on standard, which means that you can easily butter through any frontal armor, where before it might have been a little bit iffy. So those are my arguments on why I personally run Calibrated, is because there's never really an area where I am just needing that last shell to get out. It's always, okay, I've got time, I'll poke this guy when I need to, and I'd much rather fire an 8p shell than losing damage by shooting heat. The thing about heat is that, of course, the more you shoot, the more you're lowering your DPM, which in turn is just negating gun rammer. And every second you're not shooting that you've gained with that gun rammer, no, you fire a shot and you can't poke this guy, or you're not poking, or you don't have that shot, you're basically losing all the advantages where you would have had big advantages with running calibrated shells. My clan lead used to love running rammer on a lot of vehicles, and I actually managed to change his mind on a lot of tanks, and as much as he probably hates to admit it, he does enjoy running calibrated shells now quite a bit. So yeah, that's one of the things I do like to say. Now, as I said, there are specific examples where I don't. Vehicles like the Badger, vehicles like the Hori, because the Hori, well, it's a Hori. You don't really need 399 millimeters of premium pen. That's just one of the examples where I draw the line because it's so ridiculous. But yeah, for a lot of these vehicles, I'm running calibrated shells. But for the Hori, and I said the Badger, and the Object 263, as these are high DPM tanks apart from the Special Hori, those are a little bit of a different example. But 113, E3, these are frontline tanks that I'd much rather have that pen and butter through frontal armor than, of course, running your gun rammer. Especially the 183, if you are not running calibrated shells in your 183, this isn't even about the DPM, it's about the high explosive penetration. It's up 22 millimeters on your HE pen. And that is insane, because this vehicle rides off of the high explosive squash head. The whole point of the 183 is to deal that 1300 damage. And if you're taking away penetration from that 1300, and believe it or not, there are many people I know that do this, and it irritates me a lot, what is the point? So yeah, that's one thing that I always say. Any tank that has HESH, FE2 and 5B, Chieftain Mark 6, Super Conqueror, or a vehicle like the 183, FE4 202, you should be running calibrated shells. It's not even about the DPM at that point. You're literally just hurting your chances of penetrating enemy opponents with your HESH. As well, for the 183, I am running Refined Gun. The 183 has 0.407 dispersion. It's terrible. But if you're running Refined Gun, you can get it down to about 0.36 seconds, similar to a E100. So as long as you sit still, which is quite a bit of time, 5 seconds, but of course you are Tank Destroyer with a turret, which means your gun doesn't bloom that much when you turn it. As long as you sit still and you know where to play this tank, you can get some really nice shells out with Refined Gun, where sure, you might get 10% better on movement dispersion, but it's a 183. If you're driving and shooting on the move with this tank, you got some serious problems. Gee. So what have we broken into? We've done the Tank Destroyers. We've done really just the tank destroyer, should I say. Heavy tanks, the Super Conqueror is one of those examples that was weird, because the Super Conqueror has amazing on-movement dispersion, but for the most part, I'm going to be running vertical stabilizers, enhanced gun length drive, and calibrated shells. It brings you up 34 millimeters of heat pen on any of the 374 pen tanks. Now, how many are there? Well, we got the E5, we got the T95E6, of course, we just had the IS4, we've got the Grandong, and we got the 57 Heavy. Is there any other vehicles? No, that's about it. And of course, you got vehicles, should I say, like the WZ-113, which are very close on heat pen at 369. You've got vehicles like the E100 at 367, I think it is. So these vehicles all have, yeah, there you go, 367. So all these vehicles have great heat penetration if you're running calibrated shells, and you greatly improve on your abilities to cut through strong armor, especially as a heavy. You want to be able to cut through armor. A vehicle like the M6 Yo, of course, because this is an autoloaders, you always want to run calibrated shells. Now, there are a few exceptions. At tier 7 on my AMX 1357, I'm actually running vents, but that's because it already has terrible pen and you don't need the pen. Tier 10 is a different story. You're going up against very heavily armored tanks most of the time, and this heat going up 32 millimeters, that massively saves you on having to load the premium and completely demolishing your damage per minute, because of course your heat has, look how much less DPM, that's 80 less damage, so you're losing 160 damage every clip you're shooting with heat. Why would you want to do that with a vehicle like this? So it's something I always say, but let me know what you guys think about my equipment loadouts in the comments down below. For advice, any autoloader, you should never be running vents. That's just something that any skilled player won't do, is run vents. Sure, it's a 5% buff to all stats, but it's not worth it. You should just be running calibrated. That way you can penetrate through frontal armor. All the heavies, basically at tier 10 for me, I can scroll through literally every heavy tank, and you'll see that it's off to the right for calibrated shells. Always, just heavies, I find it very important to cut through frontal armor with calibrated shells. And of course, for mediums and lights, it's the exact same scenario. All of them will be running calibrated shells. I just find it very important to get through. Well, I guess the 140 I'm actually not, but I must have been trying to do a video on that. Either way, you can see all these tanks here, I'm going to be running calibrated. It's just common sense for me because the biggest thing about mediums is they have about 330 heat pen with calibrated, and it's 300 base. Now the issue is, if you're running normal pen, which a lot of players do that want to maximize that DPM, especially for a vehicle like the Leopard, you really get a higher amount of DPM, 257. The issue arises that you can't penetrate heavy tanks frontally with this pen. If you go up against a E100 turret, if you have a Jagdpanzer, if you have a Mouse, if you have an IS-4, if those vehicles are hiding their lower plates, you literally cannot penetrate their turrets if they know how to angle. And that's a problem, because then you have to flank them. And at that point, you've lost so much DPM, you've had to go out of your way to do something. That's just in a losing scenario, of course. So I just run the Cali. That way I can penetrate through frontal armor a lot easier and not have to worry about flanking in a medium tank, because basically every medium tank is sitting at 330. You know, that's the E50M. You've got vehicles like the Progetto, 325. And then, of course, there's vehicles like the TVP that only have 320, which, oh, yeah, it's bad. So you really want to increase that. Hopefully, you guys learned something in today's video. If you disagree with what I said, let me know in the comments down below. But other than that, stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. Bye-bye.